Imagine this for a moment. You're rich, really rich. So rich that terms like wealthy and well off downplay your financial enterprise to an almost offensive level. Chartering a private jet is the equivalent of an ordinary person buying a Starbucks. Even the purchase of a private yacht doesn't faze you. You're respected by the entire world for your astute business knowledge and sound financial advice. Well, for a number of years, this was the idyllic reality of Allen Stanford, who built a multi-billion-dollar investment company that garnered the attention of thousands across America. Except there was just one discrepancy. There was no investment company. It was all a lie. And in this video, we'll show you how Allen Stanford was able to pull off the ultimate heist and scam America out of $7 billion. Now, to gain a true understanding of how Stanford was able to create such a huge, fraudulent empire, we need to take a couple of steps back. Because Stanford was not born into great wealth. Born in 1950 in the small Texan town of Emexia, the son of a barbershop owner and a nurse, the Stanford family's income was extremely modest. Yet, despite these surroundings, Stanford grew an obsession with entrepreneurship and the art of money-making from an early age. He wanted to become rich. He wanted to retire his parents and experience the finer things in life. And I'm not talking about business class flights. I'm talking about chartering private jets and cruising in a paid-for yacht. So, after leaving school, Stanford started his first business in the pursuit of wealth, a bodybuilding gym. Now, this gym failed pretty much the second it started, as gyms so often do, forcing Stanford to go back to the drawing board. Next, Stanford turned his attention to something slightly different: offshore banking, a venture known for its legal obedience the world over. His first venture took the form of opening an offshore bank in the small Caribbean island of Montserrat in 1983. Using this bank, Stanford offered investors much higher returns than normal US banks, making it an attractive investment opportunity. However, regulatory bodies in the US quickly caught on to Stanford's scheme, forcing him to relocate to Antigua. And it was here that the Stanford International Bank, or SIB, was created, and with it, the foundations for one of the biggest scams in American history. Stanford's business model was simple. He promoted safe, high-yield certificates of deposit, which are basically long-term savings accounts, to potential investors, while his competition on US soil generated returns of 2 to 3%. His bank offered a guarantee of 10% interest or higher, making his company an out-and-out leader in the market. There was also the promise that the securities the bank invested in were highly liquid, essentially meaning that the bank could sell assets very quickly, allowing investors to enjoy their returns instantly. For added security, Stanford promised that all of its assets were globally diversified and maintained by high-level managers, alongside analysts in Tennessee. Naturally, these numbers instantly garnered attention, and individuals across America started pouring their money into Stanford's bank. And you can understand why. Stanford did a great job at making everything look legit, and the potential returns was so good that most couldn't fathom saying no. The offer only became more attractive when Stanford showed early success stories of his investors realizing their epic return. However, there was one slight problem. The whole thing was a lie. The reality was that there was no company, no bank, and no investment strategy. The money went directly from an investor's account to his own, and he used said money to fund his own lifestyle, and in turn build his status as a wealthy billionaire. To keep the Ponzi scheme afloat, Stanford engaged in classic tactics, such as paying early investors dividends to prove his company's legitimacy. In 2008, after the financial crash, he even went on to report that he personally invested over $740 million in the company to strengthen the bank's capital base, just so people would keep investing. And let me tell you something, the lifestyle that he lived off the back of this scam was absolutely unbelievable. For instance, Stanford built a cricket ground in Antigua that hosted genuine multi-million-dollar matches. During one tournament called the Stanford 2020, players were literally being seen handed duffel bags with over $1 million in cash. He purchased private jets and a 112-foot yacht. He owned high-rise real estate in Texas, Florida, Antigua, and Europe. He dined in the best restaurants, wore the best suits, and had the latest watch on his wrist. His purported net worth at its peak was over $2 billion. But the reality was that none of this money was his. He was using the hard-earned savings of doctors and nurses, mothers and fathers, employees on the brink of bankruptcy to fund his lavish lifestyle. Though he didn't know it yet, karma was coming for Stanford, and it was going to hit him hard. Because in 2007, the walls started to crumble from within Stanford's own company. You see, you can't run a fraudulent operation for decades without someone starting to smell something fishy. And the beginning of the end for Stanford actually came from inside the very walls of his own empire, in the form of a whistleblower by the name of Lisa Roberts. Roberts worked as an accountant for Stanford's company, and the longer she worked for the business, the longer she realized that things just weren't adding up. People were investing, but they weren't getting anything in return. Once her suspicions arose, it didn't take long to find the fake spreadsheets and investment strategies. The more she uncovered, the less she could sit on her discovery. So, she didn't. Almost as soon as she uncovered the mountain of deceit, she went to the FBI with her findings. Funnily enough, she wasn't the first employee to whistleblow, and she wasn't the last. Over the next few years, more and more whistleblowers went to authorities who started to build a case against the billionaire adored by investors the world over. Now, before we get into just how crazy things get, if you haven't already, please pound that subscribe button. It's completely free, and it'll help prevent scammers from robbing you of your entire life savings. So please, do yourself a favor, subscribe or be scammed. It wasn't a quick process. In fact, it took 2 years to compile enough evidence to bring a claim against him, but they were eventually able to build their case. And on the 17th of February 2009, the FBI raided Stanford in his own home. In court, Stanford's actions were exposed in the cold light of day, and the authorities' findings were simply unbelievable. Despite the plea that he was actually running a legitimate business, prosecutors revealed that he had stolen $7.2 billion from over 28,000 investors across 113 countries. He was convicted on 13 counts of fraud, as well as conspiracy and obstruction. His punishment, 113 years in jail. On top of this, the court imposed a personal money judgment of $5.9 billion on Stanford, which is essentially an ongoing obligation for him to pay back the money he earned through his crime. To this day, Stanford is, to our knowledge, still serving his prison sentence and likely will until the end of his days. Ultimately, Allen Stanford's story goes to show just how much you can get away with if you purport to be something you're not with enough conviction. However, when it comes to using your charm and backstory to con America, Raffaello Folieri makes Stanford look like a complete amateur. Check out the video that's popping on your screen now, and I'll show you what I mean.